Hi, this is Jack Downs with a run through the very large tutorial on Dreamweaver. This is part one, the beginning. Um, by the way, thanks to David Powers and the Dreamweaver Development Group, Development Center at Adobe, which this tutorial is based on. And the goal of this is to get you familiar with Dreamweaver functions, and at the same time, you're going to learn some important, more advanced CSS techniques. Some of you will like Dreamweaver, which is a web authoring software, not used by a lot of professionals, most of who would do everything by hand, or still is by hand, but do it without the added functions of Dreamweaver. However, some professionals use Dreamweaver and use it kind of like Notepad++. It does some extra stuff, but nothing that it creates is different from CSS and HTML that you create in Notepad++. You can open Dreamweaver files that are created by Dreamweaver in Notepad++ and make some changes. Then you can close them, and you can open up in Dreamweaver. So there's no proprietary files. I'm assuming you have the very large tutorial handout with you, and you're going to go through it at the same time as I do this, or using this video for reference. I will read some things from it. I may skip some things too, but at least I'll get through most of the commands and so on. If you hear any rustling around as we're doing this, so I'm doing this screencast, that is simply all the pages of the tutorial. Okay, to start with, you should have downloaded a zip file from Moodle, and it looks something like one of these. Here's the zip file itself. I've got more things in my folder. Please ignore it. This zip folder is got a 2018 date. In the future, the dates may be different, but we assume the tutorial will be roughly the same. And how do you unzip? Well, the way I suggest is you just double-click, go inside, do a right-click copy on the file, and then go back out of it and paste. Now, the issue is you have to get the stuff out of the zip file. That's the easiest way to do it. Go in it, grab the stuff, copy it, go outside and paste, and then go into that folder to work, the new folder you pasted. You can't work inside a zip folder, so don't try to. Nothing will work right. So one way or another, you've gotten it out of the zip folder, and you're ready to continue. I'm actually going to use this one, which is the same thing. When you open up this zip folder, you'll see there's something called Bayside Last Name, which is your root folder. So you don't have to make the root folder and all the rest of the folder structure here. They are already here. I'm going to rename that and put my name in, although in this case I'm going to call it tutorial. You should put your name in there. So what else do we have here? We have an originals folder, so that's not in the root folder. Only thing in it is a Word document that we will use to get some text from. And now we go and let's take a quick look inside the tutorial folder. You see 1, 2, 3 subfolders. Great. They are images, JS, and styles. In images, there are 2 images we'll use. In JS, there is some JavaScript. Don't worry about that yet. And in styles, there's nothing yet, because that's where our style sheet will go. So I think we are ready to begin by opening the program. We are using, let me get my About Dreamweaver up, Dreamweaver CC 2015. So make sure that's the one that you have. Okay. When you open up the program, it should look something like this, but maybe not quite. One difference is that it probably won't say design, it'll probably say default there in the upper right-hand corner. See that area? That's one of your first steps, is to set the workspace. And working in a lab or one of our classrooms, you'll probably have to do this every time. Other thing that will look different is, I'll do that now, set my workspace to design, which will give us the tools and the panels that we want to have access to. Other thing that's different is, you'll see I've got all this stuff here. That's because I've done this tutorial, different parts of it, different times, and so on, and they're showing up here because I'm using my office computer, and it's keeping track of that stuff. That's one of the great things about Dreamweaver. It keeps track of your projects. You can just double-click here and open them back up again, but that won't be the case for you in a lab or classroom where everything gets zapped every time. Okay, in fact, that's something to talk about. First of all, is site definition. So why would you use Dreamweaver? Well, one of the biggest reasons is it has something called site definition. It keeps track of your files and folders, their names, their paths, all the links and everything. And if you change anything, like change the name of a folder, the name of a file, it automatically updates all that stuff. So that's really useful. You also see, if you move on to page 2, that it has something called it keeps track of something called the remote folders. Now, we don't have remote folders in this exercise. We're just working on the root folder. They call that the local folder. We call it the root folder. Same idea. It's the folder that contains the website. But if you had an offline site, that would be your root folder on your drive or whatever, and you were making changes and updates, and you already had a live site in a remote folder someplace else on the internet, on a server, a web server, then you could use Dreamweaver to make changes in the one and have them updated to the other. That's one of the other advantages. But the big thing for us is this site definition. Keeps track of your stuff. And here's how we use it. In fact, it also points out one of the big errors that people make with Dreamweaver is they just start and they say File New, or they click on one of these Create New buttons, when really you should start with Site, New Site. Now, right now, this makes sense because this is a new site you're starting. But in a lab or classroom, you will probably do this. You should do this choice every time you continue working on your site, even though it's not a new site anymore. So the idea of calling it Site New Site is a little bit strange. It really should be called Site Tell Dreamweaver where your folders are, because that's what we're doing. We're going to tell it where our folders are. We're going to use a name now. And I'm going to call this something. And look at it, I'm not going to use our naming rules. Ooh, it's strange for me to write in capitals and spaces. And the reason is because this is not a real name that gets attached to any stuff like your files or folders. This is just a name that Dreamweaver uses to try to organize the project. So you really won't see it anywhere except over in the Dreamweaver splash screen where recent files are listed. It might be there. But even there, you don't see it until you look all the way down the path. Anyway, I'm going to call this something. I suggest you call it your name and a date, maybe. Whatever. Something like that. I'm going to call it Jack Tutorial Video. Good. We'll do that. Okay, so I'm going to say save. No, not quite yet. I'd also like to tell it where. Well, actually, we didn't do the first part, did we? That was the local information. Let me go back again to the site. We also, besides giving a name, we have to tell it where the root folder is. So I'm going to hit the browse button, and you will have to also, mine's probably a different place than yours. I go to my drive, and I go to dated folders and stuff. Yours is someplace in your drive also. I'm going to go find mine. You have to go find yours. That's the folder you just changed the name for, right? Mine is Tutorial, Bayside Tutorial. That's it. That's what I called mine. Yours is Bayside, your name. See how I see that? Up here in this kind of navigation bar thing up here, this path, and I see inside I see images, JS, and styles. So I'm in the folder. The folder is open. That's how I will. That's what I want to see. I want to select the folder, and then I'm going to go to Advanced Settings. So I've clicked on Advanced Settings. I've been on site before, now Advanced Settings, and I want to go to also show it where the images folder is. So I'm going to go. Click on Images folder, open up my Images folder now, and nothing is shown inside. There's no subfolders, and say Select Folder, and then I can say Save. And what has happened is, all that did is it told it where the folders were. The root folder, which they call local, and the Images folder. So now it'll know where to put stuff. It'll help to organize things. So you should do that every time. It's not mandatory. You could still save work and you won't lose things, but it's a good practice with Dreamweaver. And you'll see as a result in my Files panel up here, I now have the subfolder shown. It's kept track of the site. It knows where things are. Okay, if you're following along on paper, we are now finished with page 3. Just a reminder that site, new site, which is site definition, is something you will have to do every time, unless you came back to the same computer during the same day, and then you might see your project over here in the recent files. You could just double click on it. Now we've done that, let's go ahead and create our first web page, because you saw there was no HTML documents in that folder yet. How we do that? We could go under File New, or since we have the splash screen up, we can just click Create New right here. And then let's do that, Create New HTML. Okay, we did Create New HTML. We want to make sure that HTML is selected here, and it is. We want to make sure it says HTML5 here, and it probably does. Change that if it doesn't. We're going to give this thing a title right now. The title I suggest you give it is Index. no, sorry, not index. Sorry, the title of this is going to be, hold on, let me find it in my, I think it's just going to be Bayside Beat. Let me just check and make sure. Bayside Beat and your name. Just to keep your name in there. You get used to this Bayside Beat idea because it's throughout. This is like a travel, imaginary travel site sort of for the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm going to call mine tutorial. You can put your last name here. You'll see the screenshot on page 4. I say create, and what do we got here? Well, your page probably will come up like, maybe like this with live, probably like this with live. It might, but what you want to do is, you probably will see it like this, live screen. If you don't see these panels over here, and this big properties panel, property selector down here, or some people call it property inspector, if you don't see those things, then that means that you probably haven't chosen your workspace, or you need to do it again because you restarted the computer or moved to someplace else. Okay, we're going to spend most of our time in of the multiple views up here, the 1, 2, 3 views, the split view. The split view, and I'm going to change this so that it's more equal amounts, top and bottom, shows us something like a browser on the top, and then something below that is not a browser, that is the code. In fact, the code should be familiar to you, right? Look at it. It's all the basic HTML code that you started off with. I can put my cursor in there and select things, by the way. I can just type in there. I can use it just like Notepad++. But the nice thing is, of course, we didn't have to go and type all that stuff in. It kind of knew to put all that because we chose HTML5. Okay, so we made the new document, and we looked at the split view. And we're moving on to page 5. I showed you the code area. We could save it. Let's go ahead and save it. Save or save as is the same thing now. In fact, you can see it's untitled right now, and it's got an asterisk next to you. Whenever you see an asterisk on a tab in Dreamweaver, it means there's unsaved changes. In fact, let me tell you one general thing about Dreamweaver. Multiple times throughout the tutorial and the days that you do it, it'll probably tell you when you're closing the program or something, you have unsaved work. In general, whenever Dreamweaver tells you you have unsaved work, say save, say yes, do the save, unless you really know you don't. You probably want to save your work. Okay, file, I'm going to save. So look at this. It automatically knew where to put this. It's in my root folder. It's because that site definition is working. I'm going to call this index. If I just type index in, it will put the appropriate .html afterwards. By the way, there's also this site root button you'll see around. That would be if for some reason it didn't find the right place and I wanted to go to the root level, but it did already. So I don't think you really have to worry about using that. But anyway, save. And what happens? My document shows up over here, my HTML document in the files panel. Good. And so we've got an HTML document made and saved with a name. The asterisk has gone away. We're going to make a new document. We could do this with, go to File, New, or we could do Control-N, the same thing. So let's go ahead and make a new one. I'm going to File, New. And these things should all stay. This time we're not going to put the title in right now. We'll put the title in later. We'll just say Create. This one we're going to leave, we left the title field blank. That's right. We're going to go ahead and click in this live view area up here. Now, what may happen is that maybe you feel like you can't click in it, so you may have to change it from live to design and then click in, which I just did now. You'll usually leave it on live, but we don't have anything typed in there yet. So, and what do you want to type here? Let's just type sightseeing and under construction. This is the only thing we're going to put in this page. This second page, which is going to be called Sites, I believe that's what we're saving it as. It's like just a placeholder page, just so we can have a second page. So that's why we're just typing in some generic information there, not even formatting it. And what's next? Well, we give it a title, right? We give it a title. Now we could do this in a couple of ways. We could go to the code view down here, and you can see where the title is. I could just type in there the title, Or I've got this area down here. As long as I have my focus in the body here someplace, I have this property inspector down here. And look, there's a document title field. I can put it in there. Let's do that because it's different. We're going to call this Bayside Beach Sightseeing. Whoops, I got my caps on. And I could hit Enter or Tab for it to take effect, and then I see it's been put into the title field there. So that's a little different way to do things like that. Now we are going to save it as Sites. And this time it's regular save or save as, the same thing. Control S would do it because it's a new document. And we're going to call this Sites. And that's going to be it. I'm going to click Save. It shows up down here also. At this point, I'm not going to do anything else with this document, so I'm going to close it up. And we have gone through into page 6, which then talks about one reason we do keep we tend to work in split view is that although Dreamweaver is pretty reliable, it occasionally puts in some code that we don't want, especially non-breaking spaces, and occasionally it'll throw in some other odd stuff. So we do like to always check out what we do in the code view, although we'll see it showing up here in this live view, which is kind of like a preview. Not exactly, though. Also, this mentions the DOM panel, which we're going to be doing soon. And also it mentions that you could split vertically if you prefer. You can find that under the View menu. I like this default view, which is the up here and down here, but you could do it the other way too. And that's about it. Okay, good. Now we're on to part 2 already. So we're going to do part 2 now also. Okay, let's create a container for the web page and add a style sheet. Before adding any text, the idea is we're going to create a div with an ID of wrapper. And that's not an unusual thing at all on many sites. It allows us to grab a container and then use that container in different ways for different types of styling. So it's sort of like the body, but it's inside the body. So we're now in the main Bayside index. We've closed the sites. We're going to click anywhere here in the live view, and the effect of that you see is it highlights the body. So it's a way to activate the body. Good. Well, we're going to use a new panel, the Insert panel, and here it is. Click on Insert. Insert should default to HTML. There are other things we could insert beside HTML, but this is what we're going to use almost all the time in HTML. You could find it might look like this more. If you want to see more, you can move this divider between these panels, whatever, but we're only going to worry right now about the div, so that's on the top anywhere, right? So we're going to click on div, which is the first name at the top. This inserts the HTML element with some placeholder text between the tags in the underlying HTML. The placeholder text is displayed in live view, surrounded by a light border. So I click on div, and it put a div in there, and it shows up here with the placeholder text. Good. The blue boulder has it includes the name, which is the div, and this little tab is called the element display. The element display, which we're going to use a lot. Of course, that's new. You never had that in Notepad++. As you know or should know, a div is a generic container, block kind of generic container, contains all kinds of stuff. This will contain everything on the page. But it doesn't do anything unless you give it an ID or class. We're going to give this an ID. We're going to give it an ID called wrapper because it wraps everything up, and that's tradition as we call it, wrapper. And to make this an ID, of course, it's going to be #wrapper. Okay, so we did #wrapper, and now we're going to use Enter or Tab. I think I'm going to use Enter, the Enter return button, the regular Enter button, which is on the right side of the main part of the keyboard, to activate it, essentially, to confirm it. And when I do, I get a pop-up that shows up. It says select a source, and it says select a media query. Media queries are something you're going to learn about later. In fact, that's an important part of responsive pages that you'll be introduced to in this tutorial. But we're not going to do that now. What it means by a source is it's saying, well, this is an ID on a div. You must want some CSS to go with that. So where is the CSS? Do you want to define it in your page? In other words, do you want to embed it in your page? No, you do not. What you're going to do is use this pull down, and you want to create a new CSS file. When I click on that, I get a create a new CSS file dialog box. We're going to click the Browse button to put it in the right place and to give it the right name. And link is correct. So we're going to click on Browse. Now this is a style sheet, so we want to open up the Styles folder so we can see the word styles there. Nothing else is in there. Give it a file name. The file name we're going to use is responsive. Remember, although the very beginning when we did the site definition, I told you we didn't have to worry about rules for that. Everything else we have to worry about are naming rules, everything lowercase, no special characters, so on and so forth. And it'll put the CSS on there. So we say save, and we say OK, and a few things have happened. By the way, we are done with this box now. If I click off in the white area here, it will go away. Good. We now have a new thing up here. We have source code and responsive code below the name of the file in the tab area up here near the top of the program. So you can guess that this, when I click on responsive CSS, I will see the style sheet, which at this point is extremely boring because we don't have anything in it at all except for that ID wrapper. Okay, good. If I wanted to go back to the HTML, I click on the source code. You also see, if you went to the files folder, now in the styles folder, there has shown up the responsive.css. So it's there too. It's keeping track of things, right? Good. I'm going to go back to insert, and I'm going to make sure I'm in source code. And we are finished page 6 now. And we are back in the source code. And we are going to, we can also notice that the link has been created to the style sheet too, right? You can see that in the source code. So the link was made for you, and it knew where to put it and how the link was made. So that was a little easier, I suppose, than do it by yourself. We're going to do a save. I'm going to show you a different kind of save. Save all related files. That's a good kind of save to save everything, because now we have more than one document involved, right? And in the future, you may have even more than that. Okay, the page will, if we're here on page 9 now of all things, right? This talks about the fact that this preview window uses a version of Chrome. That's good. But of course, it's not really like a drag and drop, move boxes around sort of thing. You still have to use the CSS and all the regular kind of HTML, CSS stuff. The page does look rather bland, as it says, yes. You could read through that on page 9. Now we're going to put some text in here. Well, we're going to use the placeholder text. You notice that when we made that div, it created some placeholder text. Good. So now we're going to use the use that placeholder text and turn it into an H1, and then we're going to type over it. Good. In the live view, oh, sorry, here we are. Make sure the source code is selected. Good. Click anywhere in the placeholder text in live view. So I clicked in here. Okay, so the border is still blue. By the way, I can see where my insertion point is down here, but I have clicked in and activated this live view area. Good. Let's go ahead and go down to the format in the property inspector. We're going to call this an H1. So I'll click on heading 1. That's what H1 is. And of course, it made it bigger and bolder, as you would expect, right? Good. Now, just a second, excuse my rustling pages. We're going to go in and select this code, and we're going to enter an orange or gold, a different kind of mode, an editing mode for this. Right now we have this blue outline, and we could do things to it like we did with the div and so on. And we could also just click in it in style using the format thing like we did. But now I'm going to double click in here, and it goes orange. So now we can edit the text, and we see when we do that, the code view is grayed out because we're obviously working in editing the text. Okay, and we're going to call this is the H1. It's going to be base I beat. And then when we click away, we're going to see the orange border changes back to the blue, and we enter into this regular mode where we can get into the split view and get into the code if we wanted to and stuff. This is one of those moments where when we start typing things in or pasting things in, you always check down here to make sure it looks like you wanted it to and you didn't get any strange characters. For instance, your text on page 10 in the tutorial will explain that you might see some non-breaking spaces. Remember, that's a special or escape character. NBSP, if you got any of those, you didn't expect them, you want to delete them, or anything else strange. Okay, next we're going to add a list of bullet points that will later become the navigation in HTML. So the bullet points are going to be an unordered list. You should know what those are. That's a UL. With the H1 still selected in live view, so the H1 is still selected in live view. Good. All right, I can see my cursor is down there in where it is inside that element, right? We're going to go to the insert panel and we're going to insert a paragraph. Why do we start with the paragraph and not the unordered list itself? I'm not really sure, but it works fine. We're going to stick this. We got this thing called a position assist dialog. Hey, here's something new. Before, after, wrap, nest. So you want to insert something. It says in relationship to where you are at the moment. What do you want to do this? Do you want to put this before, after, wrapped by the thing, or wrapping around the thing, or nest, which is nested inside the thing? We are going to click on after. So in other words, it's after the H1 is a paragraph. And there's the paragraph. Was that a lot of work to get a paragraph? Maybe, but I suppose you get used to it and it'll go fast after a while, right? Okay. Of course, it put in some placeholder text as usual. With that paragraph still selected in live view, or you can always click back in if you're not sure. Yes, it is. We're going to go and make it an unordered list with the format tool here. Actually, no, we'll use this button here. In the property inspector down at the bottom of the page, you'll see some buttons here for unordered list, ordered lists, and moving and block quotes. We could do this other ways, but it's trying to show us different tools we could use. So unordered list, here we go, and it made that an unordered list, and you can see this developing in the code down here, right? And I'm going to go in here and click into that list. Good. And we are going to create a bunch of bullet points here. And now we're going to double click into this to enter the edit mode, and we're going to replace this text with the word home, because this is going to be navigation. So we're going to use the word home, and then I'm going to hit enter, and now we're going to use the word sites. It's going to be the other page we made. Then we'll hit enter, and we'll put some other stuff in here. We're going to put dining, events, and lodging. Lodging. Did I spell lodging right? L-O-D-G-I-N-G. No, that's right. Okay, good. That is the end of the list. If we click away from this, the orange border will go away. It will get blue, and we'll see all that stuff will show up down here as it just has, as a nicely formed UL with the LIs. Good. And let's save this. This is a good time to save, okay? Control S. Or we could do File. Even better probably is, well, save all. We'd have done it, but we didn't save. We haven't made any changes otherwise, so that's good. Okay, that finished page 11, and now we're on to 12. We're going to copy and paste some stuff from Microsoft Word. While I'm talking, I'm going to go to that folder and go back to the originals in my folder and start opening up that document, because it'll take a while to open. Good. On page 12, there's a little discussion there, which you should read, about how that Dreamweaver is not a word processor. You probably want to most of your typing outside of Dreamweaver and then paste stuff in, something from Word, for instance. The other thing is, if you are using Word and you reuse it in a very particular way, so that it knew about web stuff in web formatting, you could copy and paste into Word, and it would carry formatting with it. It's all kinds of formatting you wouldn't have to do. So that's just going to be a neat thing that you'll see happen, and something that wouldn't happen in Notepad++. But it also requires you to make this Word document just right. And coincidentally, the Word document I have was made just that way. So what are we going to do here? We're going to go to the originals folder, open up the index.docx. We're going to select all the text to the end of the copyright notice. So I'm going to click and drag down to the end of the copyright notice right there. Not this stuff down here, just there. Good. I'm going to copy, Control-C or use the menu if you prefer, whatever. I've just copied that stuff. Good. Go back to Dreamweaver. Here we go. Let's go back to Dreamweaver. All right, I want to make sure that the entire unordered list is selected. All right, how do I do that? Well, I could kind of drag and drop and drag in there and so on, but it's a lot safer to click inside of it someplace, as I did, or click inside of it someplace in here, as just happened. Good. And now look at this little list of tags down here. This is sensing all the tags that are available for where your cursor is. And if I click on UL, what happens? I see the entire UL is selected properly. There we are, finally, good. Now, we only did that because we want to move our cursor to just after the closing UL. Now we can see where it is. We could have just done this like this, but anyway, one way or another, we want to move our cursor right there. Okay, good. Right, here we are. In the code view, we moved our cursor to just after the UL. There it is, right there. See, yours should be there too. Good. And we're going to select Edit, Paste Special. Or we're going to use the keyboard shortcut, Control-Shift-V. Let's do Edit, Paste Special. Edit, not Paste, Paste Special. Okay, I don't know what this menu will look like for you as far as what will be selected as default, but what you definitely want is this third button checked here. Text with structure plus basic formatting, bold italic. And then this cleanup here is probably already checked, but it's fine to have like that. And then just go ahead and say OK. And what happened? Boom! It pasted all that stuff in. But more than that, look at the code. It gave it a paragraph, an H2, a paragraph, a paragraph. It also recognized some special characters and converted those. See what mine looks like? This is what yours should look like. If it doesn't, maybe you did the wrong kind of paste. The only thing I see that looks a little weird is that this footer area doesn't have a paragraph around it. Huh, that's interesting. We'll have to see if that's a problem later, but it should be fine for now. Okay, good. So in other words, it sensed all that stuff from the Word document and pasted it in. So interpret the structure. Here's what the code looks now. You know what? I notice on the screen grab capture from page 14 of your instructions that there's a copyright. The copyright line down there at the bottom is supposed to have a paragraph around it. So let's go take a look at that. Did mine? No, it did not. And then the div closes afterwards. So I noticed there was a little problem in my paste here. Now what could I do? Could I click on somehow insert paragraph or use the formatting tool, so on and so forth? Yeah, could, but instead, why don't we just add a paragraph? You can always go in here and just type. There's nothing that says you can't. Doesn't hurt anything. You know how to make paragraphs, open and close, fine. This would be a good place to save also. Let's do File, Save All. Why not? Sure. Okay, we're all saved up to date. We got all that text in there. And on page 14, you can see what it should look like for you in your code view. Good. Also, it discusses those special characters that you saw in there. Why don't you read about that? And on page 14, we have all the text content in. It looks very bland and so on. That's fine. But what does it look like? And how would you tell? Because this little view up here is not exactly right. Well, I know eventually you're going to want to look at this in a browser. Where's the run button? How do we see this in the browser? So on and so forth. Well, File, Preview in Browser, Chrome. Now, you could set up if you were using this in your own office or something, you probably have a shortcut key for that. You would set it up. It has one set up for Internet Explorer. Please don't use that. Let's just use Chrome or Firefox, I suppose. But you get to it from the File menu. Let's go ahead and do that and see what it looks like. And this is what it looks like now. My page looks like this. Your page should look like this too, roughly. And there's a screenshot on page 15. That is the end of part 2. I'm going to stop there for this part of the tutorial. Thanks for listening, and we'll continue with part 3 in another video.